Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. We got a special episode today. Our yearly tradition is to complete a mock draft before the draft on Thursday night. We are recording this on Monday night, so if anything crazy trade wise happens between now and then, these picks will be somewhat outdated. But usually we don't get too much the week of the draft until the day of. So hopefully this will hold up. John, thanks for joining and excited to get into this.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And to your point, it could change. We've already had some changes, so very least, I'm glad we're doing this after the Dexter Lawrence trade. It kind of makes things a little bit clearer in the top 10.
Yeah, that would have been rough timing if we had done it
Yeah,
before. And I do think it makes it interesting now, especially with the Giants having multiple picks in the top 10. Like there's what you do at 5 kind of influences what you think is necessary at 10. We're using the PFF simulator. Obviously, they have some team needs listed on the site, but we'll try to kind of bring our own perspective as well on what players we think make sense. I will say as a disclaimer, like I have not other than the quarterback positions, I have not scouted these guys as in depth. Like it's more so just kind of following, reading about these guys. So won't have as super detailed breakdowns on each individual player like we do at the quarterbacks, but I think it's still a good exercise to just kind of walk through, what could potentially happen and how that fits with different teams' needs.
yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. I haven't really uh, had deep dives on these other players, but been paying attention to some of the things that are going on. So predicting these is always fun. But
All right, let's jump into it. I don't think this first one will take you very long. John's going to take the odds. I'm going to take the evens, so John can get us started.
yeah, so I have the odds. Obviously, you have the evens with the Ravens picking 14th, but first one, we talked about him. It's obviously Fernando Mendoza. This has been, I think, known since uh, basically since the end of this season. They had the great run for the playoffs. We talked about him in our breakdown. Really good player. They also brought in Kirk to maybe start Kirk at the beginning of the year and then ease Mendoza in, or if it is a true mentorship where Cousins is just back up and just trying to train him up and get him ready. Kirk has kind of talked about it that way, so I think he may be even receptive to that at this point in his career. But definitely a really good player who I think will provide the Raiders the
Yeah, not much to talk about here. I think the fit's obvious. I think Kirk Cousins when he was signed, like just came out and said like, yeah, I'll be mentoring Mendoza. So cat's out of the bag
yeah.
here, but yeah, I think it makes sense. I think he's a worthy number one pick. So not too much to add in terms of my opinion here either. All right, number 2 gets a little more interesting. I think there's general consensus that the Jets are going to take a defensive lineman here, barring something like completely unforeseen. I again, this is what we think is going to happen, not what we would do. But sometimes I think you have to think about what you would do as a way to guess what the teams will do. And I just know if I was in this position, like I would take Arbel Reese. I think this prototype of prospect has just had so much success coming into the league of like this guy that's so freaky that he can basically play off ball linebacker or edge at such a high level. Like most of the time, like the guys that have come into the NFL the past few years that look like this, that are taking this high, they just hit and they explode once they're able to refine their pass rushing skills. I think the Jets will jump on this opportunity to add a high upside talent. They don't need to be worried about taking the most developed guy who's ready to win this year. They need to take the guy with the most upside and the most talent, and I think that's Reese in this draft.
Yeah, definitely. I think this makes the most sense. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they had a visit lined up with Bailey and canceled it.
Yeah,
That's right? All their intentions to take Reese here at number 2. So another one where it's a little muddier, but I think it is still you have a little bit of clarity.
agreed.
All right, at 3 with the Cardinals, So this is one that it's always changing, and there's always new smoke screens. You don't really know what's going on, and I saw a decent amount of stuff today that there are some expectations of the Cardinals taking Jeremiah Love at 3. I I know I would not do that. I would not take a running back at 3 because I don't think the value is ever going to be there. You're paying them too much money out of the gate. He probably is a really good player, but you never know with the draft. But this is a weaker class. They may be looking at it and think he is the best player on the board, that he's going to transform the running game. Um, I think I'm going to go with the buzz and just go ahead and take Jeremiah Love at 3 here.
Okay.
But this is we talked about with the Bailey thing at 2. Like, you go back a couple weeks ago, and Bailey might have been going at. This might be different in 24 hours, but just based on what it looks like right now, I'm going to take Love here.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. There's a ton of smoke around this. I kind of think this is a smoke screen, and this gets into like, this is a tandem mock draft. So like, I'm gonna pick things you don't think are gonna happen. You're gonna pick things I don't think are gonna happen. I tend to think that they are trying to get somebody to trade up to 3 to take Love, and they think that because like Love is kind of the guy maybe outside of Reese that people view as like the best overall player in the class, they think like maybe we can tempt Tennessee, Washington, somebody like that into trading up to 3 and moving back a couple spots. But who knows? I mean, it could be legit. I think he will go somewhere in the top 7. It just seems like people are too excited about him for him to not go. But I would not be shocked if this is a big smoke screen from Arizona specifically.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a possibility, maybe even a likelihood. And I think that if that's the case, then I would look at the Cardinals taking like Maui Noah or somebody like that. Like, I think they're probably looking at a tackle.
Yep. Okay, you made this a lot easier on me because I do think that Bailey is kind of a no-brainer at 4 for Tennessee if he's there. I had struggled to make a decision for them with some of the non-premium position guys like Styles versus Love, and then like do they actually take Bain that early? But I think Bailey fits like just a prototypical edge that would fit well in the solid defense. Like he's gonna want to build out that defensive line. That's something that he has prioritized everywhere he's been. So this is a little easier for me with Love off the board and Bailey still on the board. So I will go with David Bailey at 4 to Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going back to the Love thing. Another possibility for the Cardinals would just be taking Bailey there, and then you could see Love there at 4 for Tennessee if the Cardinals stick at 3 and pick. So in all likelihood, those 2 picks could just be flopped the night of the draft.
Yep, I agree. I think for me, Love and then like Sonny Styles would be the other 2 guys I would see maybe most likely to go to Tennessee at 4. If they think Sonny Styles is like their Fred Warner, then I could see that as well. I would have had a tough choice between Love and Styles if Bailey was not available.
Yeah. All right, so at 5, and this is where there's more smoke out there, and maybe I fall for the smoke every year. I feel like I do, but at 5, there was another one that was like, this is definitely happening until like today, and then everybody was saying this is definitely not happening.
Yeah,
and that and that one is Sonny Styles. I once again I'm gonna just read into it and make a decision. It's probably wrong, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it might still just be Sonny Styles here, and they're just putting that out there because they're trying to get people to think they don't want to take Sonny Styles to like trade up and jump them for him. So I think that it makes a lot of sense for the fit for what they need, and maybe not the flashiest pick, taking a true off-ball linebacker 5th overall, but definitely a solid player who should be a good starter for them.
Yeah, we'll get to them in more detail as well at pick 10.
Yeah.
I do. I have a hard time understanding their plan if it's not Styles at 5. We'll get to this at 10. It feels like they're gonna go receiver with their
Yeah.
second pick, but I have a hard time understanding. Like, I'd be surprised if both the top two receivers were off the board at 10. So the only way you take one of those guys at 5 is if you feel like one of them is significantly better than the other, and I'm not sure that's really where people are at this year. So I think it makes sense. Like, could I see them maybe going with like Caleb Downs at 5, like another guy similar to Styles, where it's like maybe not the highest value position, but you just think the prospect is so good it's worth it. I could see that, but yeah, I agree with the Styles pick at 5. All right, I will kind of do something a little different at 6, kind of the first one off the board. Try to call my shot a little bit here. I think one thing that is interesting to me about this draft is there are a lot of tackles that people don't know if they can play tackle. There are a bunch of guys where it's like, oh, depending on the team, like we might take this guy at tackle, we might move this guy to guard. Like, one guy that I think has almost no questions about that. It's just a question of like, how consistent can he be, and was the end of the year more of a, flash in the pan, or was this like a real jump in development, is Monroe Freeling out of Georgia. Yeah. I do think he goes higher than people expect. I think he's one of the only guys that you could say is like a true plug-and-play left tackle in the NFL. And I think he finished the year strong enough where people were kind of catching up to the hype later in the draft cycle compared to some guys that were more on the radar early on. Cleveland needs offensive tackle really badly, so I'm going to put Freeling here at 6.
Yeah, I mean, this one makes sense too, where they definitely need tackles. They need all offensive linemen, basically. So to your point, Freeling, I think, will go higher than people were initially expecting. And in a weaker class where there are a lot of tackles, admittedly, but a lot of them do feel like guard converts, I think that there's a real chance he gets pushed this far up the board. All right, at 7, the Commanders, they are a candidate to trade up, of course. We're not doing trades in this mock, but they also are, I think that they are in a pretty good position where they're at if they don't trade up to kind of scoop up whatever, like, upper tier player is left on the board. And, at this point in our mock, too, we still have a few that I think make sense for them. But I think that given who's available and just the talent level, I think that if Downs makes it to 7, given who's off the board, Love off the board specifically, I don't think he falls any farther. So I'm going to take Downs here at 7.
Yeah, completely agree. To me, it feels like their pick is basically just who of Love, Styles, or Downs is still on the board. Apparently, there's rumors that like Dan Quinn loves Sonny Styles, so like, if he makes it there, wouldn't be surprised. They could use Jeremiah Love, and I do think that's the point where that's the first team where if they did draft him, I wouldn't like absolutely hate it from just a like value perspective. They're at least a little closer to maybe like winning in the next few years, where I would understand it a little more. So yeah, that's an interesting one for sure, and I think like they probably will have one of the easier decisions on draft night.
Yeah. Well, and just one quick thing. Downs obviously started his career at Bama, and this is maybe a little bit of a hot take, but not really given his talent level, but I said after his freshman year, he was the best safety that Nick Saban had at Alabama, period. I was gutted when he transferred. Understandably, he was at Alabama for Nick Saban, and Saban retired, so understand him transferring, but he was great as a freshman, upheld that level his entire time through Ohio State. So
yeah, one of the smartest like freshmen that we've ever seen at the college level, and like he's only gotten better since then. All right, pick 8 for the Saints. This is one of the easier ones for me. I think wide receiver makes sense for them at this slot, getting somebody to pair with Olave. I'm not picking him just because of this, but you kind of compare two Ohio State receivers alongside each other here, and I do think they complement each other well. Tate is more of like the downfield ball winner type, and then Olave is more of kind of your possession, eating up a lot of receptions. So I think it makes sense here for the Saints to go wide receiver. Wouldn't be surprised if they went D-line. You still got like Bain on the board as well, but I'm going to go with Carnell Tate here at number 8.
Yeah. I mean, this is the one that feels the chalkiest so far, I think, in the draft cycle, at least in these top 10 picks. Um, so I think it makes a lot of sense for them.
All right, interesting one here.
Yeah, and I'm still actually I think that there are some interesting questions here. So with the Chiefs, they're a team that kind of is in the middle of a very soft rebuild after the year last year, and with Mahomes getting injured, and he's gonna uh, miss a little bit at the start of the year. I could see them going a few directions, and one of them that I'm considering, but I'm not gonna do is like Mansour Lane. Like they traded away two corners in the offseason. They're gonna need corner pretty bad, but I'm not going to do that. With Bain still on the board, they need pass rush help. I'm going to go ahead and take Ruben Bain. I think that people are overthinking the short arms for him. I think he's just a good player. Um, Maybe it caps out his ceiling a little bit, but um, definitely one of the they like collecting all the different body types at defensive line, and Bain is just like another weird body type that just works. Like he's just a good player, so I think it makes sense as a fit.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think DB is a position they've had success with in later rounds, so it
Yeah,
makes more sense for them to wait on that anyways.
and they
I do
have that
think
other
that
pick at the end of the first round that I think they may target somebody more with that pick.
yeah, I would love that for them if they were able to grab one of those late round, like late first round receivers. I think there's multiple guys there that could be effective for them
Yeah,
at that point. And Bain, in my opinion, is the best player left, so no concerns from me on that. Um, all right, Giants are up on the clock at number 10. Remember, at number 5, we took Sonny Styles. I also think this one has been pretty telegraphed. I'm not going to do
yeah,
anything crazy here. It seems like Jordan Tyson is a
yeah,
giant and they are like in love with him. It's a guy that's had injury concerns, but I think in terms of talent, he probably is. He does belong in this range, and it seems like the Giants are big fans of him. I think receiver makes sense as kind of that second pick in the top 10 when you pair that with Styles on the defensive side. So I won't overcomplicate this one. I'll go with another receiver here, 2 picks in a row for me at receiver, but I'll go Jordan Tyson at 10 to the Giants.
yeah. I mean, this one is almost it is a little bit telegraphed just based on
Yeah.
their meetings, but I think this could be a really good spot for him. It allows him to kind of not have the spotlight on him with Malik Neighbors. Like Neighbors is such an imposing presence that it really will be good for Jordan Tyson to just go to work without being the focus of the defense. All right, at 11, with the Dolphins, this is another one where I think they could go a lot of different
Yeah.
directions. And I think maybe that's just the name of the game for this draft because it feels a little bit weaker and there are some teams with some serious needs. Um, I think if you're just looking at the board for them, I think Maui Noah would potentially be in play. They don't necessarily need tackle very bad, but you could put him at guard. He'd be a very good guard for sure. And obviously the Miami connection is there, so I think that's a real option. I think Mansour Delane also is a very legitimate option for them in this spot. Like he's a good corner. They need a corner. Yeah. Um, This was tough because I almost changed my mind, but I do think at the end of the day, I think the corner need is probably a little more dire. So I think I'm gonna give them Mansour Delane here.
Yep. I think that makes sense. Want I will actually offer a little bit of pushback on this one. One
Yeah,
of my opinion like hot takes about this draft is I think McCoy is the first corner off the board. Um, Out of
yeah,
Tennessee. I would not be surprised. I think the Dolphins at 11 is probably like a good landing spot for a corner, regardless of who goes first. So, like, whether it's
yeah,
Delane or McCoy, wouldn't be surprised here. But I remember, like, watching him last year, he was so impressive. I remember, like, against Florida, their defense was basically just put him on an island and then let the other 10 guys play. And
yeah.
it worked super well. So yeah, regardless of which DB they go there, I think it makes sense. But yeah, I would not be surprised to see McCoy go off the board like fairly early. I actually
Yeah,
think I might take him here at 12. I think he
yeah,
would make a lot of sense for the Cowboys, so I think I'm probably going to go ahead and lock that one in as well.
yeah. I think the name of the game for Dallas is defense. I think they're definitely going defense. They're also a candidate to trade up with that second round or second first round pick at 20. People are kind of connecting the dots there. They have the ammo to go get one of the higher tier pass rushers or downs or some, like an impact player on defense. But if they do stick here, probably one of those corners is making it to them. Uh, I think if the first 12 picks go this way, the Rams are thrilled
Yeah.
because they
Yep.
have a huge hole at right tackle with Rob Havenstein retiring. So I think they take Maui Noah, set him at right tackle, forget it. I think that's I think that's probably done. I think that if Maui Noah's gone, which is realistic, they might still take a tackle here. They do have a need there, and I think the value still lines up with several of these other first round tackles like Fano and I mean Miller's probably a little bit of a reach. Proctor's being mocked all over the place. It's kind of impossible to tell where people want to take him, but I think with Maui Noah here, you kind of have to give them to the Rams.
Yeah, he does have like positional versatility for them as well, which is
Yeah.
for a contending team like probably a more valuable thing to be able to move him around to different spots depending on what they need. So yeah, I think that wide receiver is something that gets mocked for them a lot, but if there is one of these top tackles still on the board at 13, I think that's a pretty easy decision for them.
Yeah.
All right, on to the Ravens. I think there are like some interesting picks here. Like you could go tackle with like Fano or any of the other guys we talked about. Lemon's a wide receiver that like could potentially make sense. Like they definitely need to add some depth in the receiver room, but I'm not really interested in adding another like small receiver
Yeah.
to this room. Like it just I don't know doesn't
It's like
really
the
appeal to
opposite
me
of
at
what they
all.
need.
I think one name that I will throw out that I'm not going to pick. I could see Keldrick Falk being somebody that they like. A guy that's really toolsy, like very strong against the run. Minter like wants his D lineman to be able to play both, both the run and the pass pretty well. And with adding Hendrickson, like I think they need somebody in that room that can defend better against the run. So Falk's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised to see go at this point, and I think this is probably like close to the top of his range. I do think Vega, like Ione, is probably the obvious pick for them. Like they need a plug and play replacement at guard, and it does seem like the Ravens recently, their strategy in the first round has been let's just hit doubles with guys that maybe aren't at premium positions, but guys that we feel are super confident, or that we feel like we're very confident that they're solid, like pretty good players. I think Vega probably fits that more than Falk, and so that's what I'm going to go with. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a swing somewhere on the defensive side of the ball either.
Yeah, so they have that philosophy of just kind of hitting doubles. It makes sense. Lamar's your quarterback. You don't need to surround him with a ton of premier elite talent. You just get competent players around him, and you're going to be fine. And I only went like 2 years without allowing a sack at Penn State, so yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for them, and they definitely have interior need. All right, here at 15, the Bucks are another team that I think they could go a lot of directions, and I think that with the pick last year, they kind of are likely to keep everyone on their toes. So, uh, you know, I think they could go a few directions. I think the pass rush need is always really big for them. They've taken a lot of first round edges that haven't worked out. This one might be in the same category, but I'm going to go Keldrick Falk here. I think he's a younger guy. He definitely needs to like develop as a pass rusher, but could really fill a huge need for the Bucks.
Yeah, this makes a ton of sense. I do think Falk will go somewhere in the top 20, and I think
Yeah,
this is like a strong range for him with a few different teams that could use help on the defensive line. Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. All right, Jets are next. They went with Arvell Reese for their first pick, so they've got some help on the edge at this point. So probably looking to fill one of their other needs. Obviously, like I I don't think they will take Simpson here. I think this is probably the ceiling for Simpson. Like this is the first place where I could see a team pulling the trigger on him. I'm not going to do that here. I do think wide receiver is the big need that they would be looking to fill at this point. You've got Mekhi Lemon, you've got Omar Cooper Jr. A little bit further down the board, there's guys like Casey Concepcion, and then you get more into the second round guys. Denzel Boston is another name there to throw out. I don't love any of these receiver options for them, but I do think Lemon is probably the guy that most people expect to go here. I don't know if it was me, I don't know if I really want to use a top 20 pick on Lemon. I'm just probably would rather hunt a little more upside at the position, but I don't know that I feel confident enough about any of the other receivers to put them this high. So I'll go with Lemon at 16 here for the Jets. You kind of took your big upside swing on Reese earlier, like probably makes sense to get a guy you feel confident in contributing on offense.
Yeah, and I think that's a fine pick. Like, I kind of agree with you. You'd rather have more upside, but again, not a traditional draft where you have a ton of guys that you feel confident about, especially as we're getting into the teens and 20s, as having that like really high elite upside. So I think Lemon is fine and makes a lot of sense for the Jets.
All right, I might be presumptuous here, but which tackle is going to the Lions?
Yeah, definitely a tackle, I think. This one's tough. I personally would probably take Spencer Fano. I have heard that the Lions love Proctor.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a smokescreen. It very well could be. I've heard there are other teams in this range in the next few picks that also love Proctor. So it may be kind of bait to get someone to trade up. But the Lions, I don't think, are afraid to take someone who, for me, 17 would be like super high for Proctor, just given his like consistency on the field. But I don't think that bothers the Lions at all. Like I think they're confident in their evaluation. So if they love the guy, they're just going to take him. So I am going to go Proctor here. If it's not Proctor, it probably is another tackle.
Agreed. I do feel like they want like their maulers, they're guys that can really move and with size, and Proctor is that. Fano has some more concerns on that regard. So yeah, I think this makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think also you talk about left tackle, right tackle a lot, and like people are saying, oh, if you draft Proctor, you could move him to right tackle, Penei Sewell to left tackle. That would probably not make sense. Just leave Penei Sewell at right tackle where you know he's good. You don't have to mess with anything. He doesn't have to learn to, or like go back to kick sliding the other way. And same for Proctor. Like Proctor can just stay at left. Penei Sewell can stay at right.
Yep. Good call. So 18 here to the Vikings. I think the two places I would be looking most closely are receiver and then safety. I think Thieneman from Oregon is just head and shoulders better as a prospect from any of the receivers on the board here. I really like him as a prospect. I think this is a guy that if he was not white, we would probably be talking about a little differently in terms of like his athleticism and his combine numbers were ridiculous. You see it on tape as well with him. So I think this is a pretty simple pick. You can get your Harrison Smith replacement here if you're the Vikings and lock in a really good safety for years to come.
It's kind of a funny pick in a few ways for a couple of those reasons, but also because I think that Vikings fans are sick of this being mocked. Like this is another of the chalky picks, but it kind of just makes too much sense. And I think that if they will just accept it, he is a good player, and they will be happy with the pick.
Yeah, I think that's an important note. Like I am not just mocking him there because they need a safety. Like I think sometimes it's a little easy to just be like, oh, position of need. Like, okay, who's the guy that's next on the list there? I know I really do think he's a top 20 player.
Yeah, totally agree. 19, I think this is a tough one for the Panthers. I think they might want a receiver to kind of complement what's going on the other side. Like they have taken first round receiver 2 years in a row now. Is that correct? I, I'm
Yeah,
I'm kind of
Leggett and
blanking.
McMillan.
Yeah. Sorry, Leggett is the one I was blanking on, but um, Leggett obviously a disappointment to this point. I think they want to kind of round out the receiver room. So I could see this actually going two ways. I could see it being a receiver, or Sadiq is sitting here at tight end. I could see
Yeah.
that being a possibility. So I'm considering that, but also considering like an Omar Cooper Jr., who's like, maybe he's not going to be like your dominant number one, but they don't really need that. They have Ted, like they have McMillan. They can bring in a guy who's going to be a really solid number two who, if you don't pay attention to him, if you don't give him his respect that he deserves, like he can still hurt you. So I think I am going to go Omar Cooper Jr. here, but I see a world where they're taking Sadiq or one of the other receivers that they prefer.
Yeah, this is another. I agree with your logic here completely. This is another one I'll kind of throw out another name that we'll probably get to at some point here. Um, I would not be surprised if Casey Concepcion comes off the board
Yeah.
at some point in this range. I feel like he's probably projected to go a little later, maybe like end of first, early second. If he didn't have like terrible drops on his tape, I think he would be a consensus like top 20 player. And I think somebody's going to talk themselves into it. I don't know who, but there's just so much explosiveness on his tape. And also, if you watched A&M this year, you know how terrible the quarterback play was. Like, he had the highest percentage of like off target throws of any single player in the draft. Like, I think there's legit reasons to believe that some of the drops will get better as he gets into the NFL. So another name I would throw out here at 19. We'll probably get to him at some point.
Yeah, that
All
one
right.
makes more sense, I think.
Dallas here at 20. I think this is actually a place where I think a trade down for them makes a ton of sense here in real life. So far, they've taken McCoy at 12, so they've got their corner. Again, like they're probably just trying to add anything on defense here, but I don't really want to take CJ Allen. I don't want to take him this early. I think it's likelier that he goes later, maybe on day 2. I also think that you've got 4 teams behind you that are tackle hungry, and someone is going to want to come up and get Fano here at this point if he's still available. So in real life here, I would say like I definitely would recommend a trade down at this point. I'm tempted to just like double up on corner and take another one at this point. I think that's probably the best. Oh, actually, never mind. I know what I'm doing. I think Caden McDonald, like somebody's going to fall in love with him in this range. I don't think he gets past this. I think he's really talented and like really only played a year of like starting reps at Ohio State, but most schools would have been talked about a lot more coming into this year. I think that gives them a nice addition on the interior to pair with Clinton Williams. So I'm going to go with McDonald. I think he makes a lot of sense for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I can definitely see this happening. I think McDonald is one that, just given the lack of interior defensive line players, is going to go earlier than people would probably want to take him. But another one that I think is like, maybe you're not chasing upside, but like he's a solid player and can definitely help you. And Dallas kind of needs that. Like they definitely could use that. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, to your point, they probably should trade down if they still have this pick when they get to 20.
Yeah.
All right, 21. This is another of the potential Simpson landing spots, just given the state of Aaron Rodgers, or the lack of clarity around Aaron Rodgers. I mean, who knows what's going on? I'm not going to do that for a couple of reasons. I don't think that he's really a good fit with the Steelers. The Steelers play a lot of really tough teams in cold weather. You kind of associate Steeler football with hitting on both sides of the ball. They favor that like bigger Big Ben body type, and like that is just not Simpson's game. We saw him get beat up and it affect his play this year. So I just really don't think it makes sense as a fit for him. Um, I think uh, the other directions they could go are like, potentially receiver. I think realistically though, I'm gonna take a Spencer Fano, and like he's I don't think he makes it this far personally. I think he probably goes earlier than this, and I don't really love this spot for the Steelers. I don't know if the like ultimately the players match the needs for them, but I'm gonna take Fano here.
To me, this is for them. Like if a tackle falls to you that you like, or like Ione, the Penn State guard, like
Yeah,
if one of those offensive linemen that you actually have rated pretty highly falls to you, perfect. If not, like you're probably going receiver, but you can like I could also see them trading back out of this depending on
yeah,
who's available. Like I don't know. I could see there being a lot of movement here. I do think one of the things I've noticed as I've gone through and done some mock drafts, I think a lot of tackles will go in the first round. I am not sure how many of them go early, and I do think there's going to be a couple of these guys that slip into the late teens, early 20s, just because I'm not sure how many teams in this like 10 to 20 range really need a tackle.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if one of these guys does make it to the 20s, but I think, if you're the Steelers, the Eagles, the Browns, like there's a bunch of teams in this range that I think would love to potentially take a tackle if they were to make it to this range of the draft.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
All right, Chargers would die for an interior offensive lineman. Um, I don't really think there's anybody here at like the defensive line that I would love to add. I'm not as much of a Mesidor or Howell person myself. They could go with a weapon here. I'm gonna actually drop down a little bit off the board here and go with Emmanuel Pregnon, the guard out of Oregon. I think they really need somebody they feel confident is going to be a high level guard, and Pregnon's a great athlete, really powerful guy. I think this is a position that they have to get right this year and shore up and hope your tackles get healthy. So I'm going to go with him and kind of bet on the guard position there for the Chargers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have great tackles if they're healthy, and you definitely have to improve the protection in front of Herbert. I mean, if you don't, then you have seen what it's going to look like, and he deserves better than that, honestly. I'm kind of a Herbert truther, uh,
Yep.
like to a certain extent. He really gets hated on, but I think he's a much better player than he's perceived as. Um, 23. So the Eagles are kind of in a state of flux where they have, for the first time in a few years, some questions on offensive line about like the long term state of it, the longevity of some of their players. I could see that being a realistic path for them. There are all of the rumors swirling about AJ Brown. Is he going to be traded or not? There are a lot of people that firmly believe he is going to be a post June 1 trade for salary cap purposes. Um, so I think both of those are realistic possibilities. And I think if you're talking linemen, I think if Proctor made it to them, Proctor kind of seems like their type. Big body, but a really good mover. Ihanacher is another that like I think I could see them really liking it at offensive line. But I'm gonna go a little bit out there. I'm gonna go Casey Concepcion and say maybe they're gonna go ahead and draft the AJ Brown replacement, knowing for a fact they're gonna need it. If they're planning on trading him, they're gonna need someone to step in and be that other presence and let Devontae Smith be the 1A now.
Yeah, I like it. I think that would be fun. That would, I think, be an interesting pairing with Devontae Smith. Like it's two smaller receivers, but I do think they play different roles within an offense. So I wouldn't completely I don't think there's too much redundancy there. I think Ihanachor is the guy that if Stoutland was still there, I think that's like
Yeah,
an auto pick basically of like, oh yeah, like this guy that was late to football that is like
Still figuring
potentially
it out,
a
but
top
like
10 athlete in the draft.
yeah,
Yeah, like we will turn you into an all pro in 3 years. I
yeah,
wonder if they feel a little differently about that now, but yeah, he to me, he's the guy where like if none of the receivers are left that they like, I think he's the other guy I would point to at this range.
yeah, definitely.
All right, you just made 24 harder for me because I was definitely going to take Concepcion
Oh, you're going that way.
there at 24 because they went. I had them taking Freeling at 6, right? So like I'm not sure that they.
Double up on tackle in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly wouldn't hate it
I
for
would, I
them.
would, I would do it personally. I don't know if they'll do it. I think they may go receiver tackle, but
Yeah, I'm kind of debating. I'm debating right now between Denzel Boston and Ihanachor.
yeah,
I think I'm just gonna take another tackle. Honestly, I would not be shocked if they do this and
yeah,
come back around, um, and get another guy. This is it's probably two guys that are more long term swings, but I think that's exactly how they should be thinking right now. Like I don't really care how good these guys play this year. It's about the quarterback that you draft next year and the situation you're setting up. So I'm gonna go with him here. I think this would be fun if they were to do this in round one and just like really commit to building that offensive lineup for the future because it's one that for a while was pretty solid and now like everybody has come up for free
yeah.
agency and like is leaving at the same time. So like they do have to completely overhaul this room.
Yeah, well, and you talk about like the lack of upside plays in at some of these spots in the draft, but I actually think both of these tackles between Freeling and Hunter are two of the more upside, the better upsides overall in the draft, and
Yeah.
including at tackle. So maybe one or both of them don't work out, but definitely worth the shot at both tackle spots. All right, and at 25, the Bears, um, obviously they do have a center need, but they're not going to take a center first round. That's just not going to happen. They also have some need at pass rush, and Mesidor's an interesting guy. And
Yeah.
Mesidor's older; he's 25, so he's not going to be for everybody. But I think that he could be a contributor who could come in and step in day one and like give you some really solid production. And that's kind of what the Bears desperately need. So I think that he is kind of a match for them, even if he's not a match for every team who may be looking for like their alpha long-term pass rusher. So I'm gonna go Mesidor here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think this is a good spot for him. I'm not as high on him going in like the top 20, but I think this is
Yeah,
where it starts to get more reasonable. I do think like if they were to go DB in this range, like McNeil Warren would be
yeah,
an interesting pick at safety out of Toledo. I also wonder like would they take a swing on one of the higher upside guys like a Caleb Banks or a Peter Woods, like a guy that maybe you feel less certain about, but more on the interior that you're excited about. But yeah, I think Mesidor makes sense, like you said, from a pass rush perspective. Like that's probably what they're hunting with this pick, and so yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, I got the Bills at 26. I feel like they could go a million
yeah,
different directions. I think
definitely.
anywhere on defense is probably a reasonable pick. Maybe somewhere on the offensive line. I do think I'm gonna stick with a defender here. You know what? I will do it. I was debating for a while whether I was going to take him in the first round. I think this guy could fall out of the top 50 or somebody could take him in this range. I'll go ahead and throw Caleb Banks in here.
Yeah,
I do think this guy is like potentially a top 15 talent in this draft. Like he was awesome at Florida when he was able to play, but he's had multiple foot injuries. This one I think teams are going to have real red flags on, but if you're the Bills and you're in this situation where like your defense needs some massive improvements, I do think like taking a swing on a guy that could be the best player on your defense in a couple years is something that you probably have a little bit higher appetite for. So
Yeah.
I'll go with him at 26. Like I said, wouldn't be shocked if we get to the end of round 2 and it's like, oh, what's happened with Caleb Banks? I think his range is super wide. Like I could see him going as early as 15 or as late as 70, but we'll be interested to see where he goes.
Yeah, yeah, I think this would make sense. He, to your point, could go anywhere. I think he has a very wide range of outcomes, but does give you a lot of upside. Just as a big guy, huge guy that's really athletic. I also, if Mesidor doesn't go to the Bears, I think that the Bills would potentially be a fit for him because he's that huge body at defensive end that they really like. Like they just like their really big bodies at defensive end. So, but
One
yeah,
thing I do want to stop here. What one thing I've noticed a couple times now, there's not really a tight end team after the Panthers
yeah,
at 19. Like Kenyon Sadiq is still on the board at this point, but there's not really, like, maybe the Chargers, but like I think they'd go offensive line. I don't
yeah.
know. Like there's kind of a dead zone here for Sadiq if he doesn't go in the top 20.
Yes, I think there is, but I actually, I, I have a thought, and I'm getting there, but it's not with this pick.
Yeah,
So maybe that kind of gives it away. But
I was
I
thinking
think
about it too. Yeah.
there's one other potential landing spot for him here at the end of the first round, but I don't think it's with the 49ers. Um, the 49ers, I think one of the things they could be thinking about long term is their tackle situation. Blake Miller started a ton of games for Clemson. I kind of think he's a no-brainer. You could also see like a Caleb Lomu. He on the board is a reach, but I think that he played a lot of football. Is a solid player. Is another one that potentially could give them a long-term solution at tackle. But I'm going to go Blake Miller here for the 49ers.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. They need a plug and play tackle. I think he's a guy that makes sense in the late first round. All right. All right, Texans on the clock at pick 28. I think pretty much anywhere on the offensive line they could find reasonable here. I almost have a hard time like really considering anything else. If you were going to, I think defensive line is probably somewhere they could add. I think Peter Woods would be interesting here. Maybe Christian Miller out of Georgia. Are there really any interior offensive linemen?
Yeah,
I
that's the
like in
tough
this
part
range?
because Lomu is definitely a tackle, so he's not really.
Yeah, I think okay. Yeah, I'm. This is a reach. I think I would rather them trade out of this pick, honestly. But I'm gonna go with Chase Basantis
Yeah,
as a guard here from Texas. Went to A&M, and it is a really good guard. I'm not sure that the positional value is like being maximized here, but I think they need answers so badly at this position that you just kind of have to make do with what you've got in this situation. I do think that their dream would be if like, well, I mean, Pregnon could definitely still be on the board at this point. He's another guy I would throw out as somebody that makes a lot of sense for them. But
yeah,
I'll go with Basantis here.
yeah, and I definitely think are ones that might want to trade out. If Sadiq falls like we think, um, this might be a spot somebody wants to trade up for him
Yeah.
if they want to try to get him first round and jump. I think a team that could potentially take him. Um, I don't know if this is really a Ty Simpson trade up spot. We I don't know if we've talked about it on the recording, but I think if Simpson has not gone before the end of the first round, I think it's very likely that a team, if they like him enough, is going to try to trade up to the end of the first round for him. The Cardinals have been linked to him. Obviously, they got that pick 34, so they may be looking to move up just to the end of the first round to get him and lock up the fifth year option as well. But I don't know if that's realistic at 28 because the teams behind them don't really need quarterbacks immediately. So, all right, here at 29, the Chiefs. I think they need receivers, but I think also if they have an eye to the future, they see Travis Kelsey slowing down. They know that long term tight end is going to be another issue. Like, he has been one of the key pieces to that offense. And now that he is reaching the end of his career, the offense has kind of slowed since they got rid of Tyreek Hill and they haven't had him at his full capacity. So I could see them having an eye to the future and saying, okay, we're going to need that elite tight end. The only elite tight ends are the ones that are physically elite. They have like elite athleticism. So I think Sadiq here could make some sense for them. Fill a need. They're smart enough offensively that they can get him on the field at the same time as Kelsey for now, and have him groomed into taking over that spot long term. So maybe a dark horse pick here, but I'm going to put Sadiq with the Chiefs here at 29.
Yeah, this would be a fun pick if he ends up making it this
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
I think if I was them, I would really struggle between him and Denzel Boston, because Boston does
Yeah.
kind of fit like they need so badly like a true X receiver, and
Yeah, they do.
it's like, do you pass up on that for maybe the upside, a guy with more upside but is not like as obvious of a plug and play fit? I think that would be a really interesting decision that they would have to deal with.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Dolphins here at 30. They went with Mansour Delane at pick 11. I do think it would be really funny if they took like McCoy at 11 and then picked Colton Hood. With their, or just like went with like the Rams strategy of like picking 2 Florida State defensive linemen, just go with like 2 Tennessee corners. I do think Hood could sneak into the first round. But I am going to go with Denzel Boston here. I think he's a first-round caliber player, and they need a receiver really bad. So I think they'd be happy to have him here, and a pretty easy pick for me on this one.
Yeah, I think Boston makes a lot of sense for several of the teams here in the end of the first round range. So I think it's likely, if he hasn't gone by this point, he's going to go first round, just because several of these teams could really use him. I think he makes a lot of sense for Miami. The Patriots, I think, are another team that could potentially go receiver, just because they need that like dominating number one presence, and like Boston potentially has that
Yeah.
upside.
When
But
AJ Brown's on their team,
yeah, true.
a month, yeah.
If we're assuming that AJ Brown's going to them, then maybe their eye to the future, they don't need that. But I think here, just given the state of the offensive line, and looking long term at some of the options that they do not really have at right tackle, I think Lomu makes sense for them
Mm-hmm.
here. So I'm going to give them Lomu. They definitely need to improve that protection for Drake May long term.
All right, before I actually make a pick and select for the Seahawks at 32, I want to talk about some of the remaining players that are left, because I think once I make a click here, it's going to like completely, like,
Yeah,
I won't be able to
yeah,
see
I
the
think
rest
you're
of the
right.
players. For the Seahawks, I'll at least go ahead and talk through my pick for the Seahawks, and then we can get to some guys that are remaining at the end of the first round. For Seattle, I think they're just so interesting because they're already so good on defense, but I do think, like, based on the talent and who's left available here, I do think like going defense probably makes more sense for them. I do feel like they're in a situation where D-line is a place where like they could continue to add depth and just stockpile talent there. There's so many guys I could pick from in this range.
Yeah, there are a ton that could potentially go here.
I'll throw one out there that I think is a little off the board that I could see going in the first round. I'll go with Malachi Lawrence at UCF and give them a little more of that like pure pass rush ability. I think they have a lot of guys on that defensive line that are very like multi-skilled, able to defend the run and the pass. I think they might be looking for a guy that's more of like a burner off the edge. So
Yeah.
I will pick him. Now let's talk about some of the other guys that we think are guys that could potentially sneak into the first round. Obviously, like all these guys kind of on the top 35 list on PFF's big board, like
Yeah.
McNeil, Warren, Terrell, Howell, Parker Woods, Colton Hood, Christian Miller, like all those guys I think are guys that if they go in the last 5 or 6 picks of the first round, like I wouldn't be surprised at all. Are there any other names like later down the board that you think are more likely than others to end up slipping into round one?
Um, we talked about Ty Simpson earlier. I think realistic shot he goes first round. Um, Jacob Rodriguez potentially,
Yeah.
one that everybody loved the film, questioned the athleticism, and then getting into the off season, that was kind of okay, box checked. He's a good athlete too, so I don't really. I think that there might be a team that just loves him, thinks he's one of the better players in the draft, and just takes him at the end of the first round. Um, Other than that, I'm not really sure because like there are players at other positions that I think are going to be good players, but I don't know if just because of the depth at their positions and like how far down their positional value they are, I don't know if there are any other like obvious ones.
I'll
Like our
throw
Mason Thomas is behind a couple of other edges that could
yeah.
potentially beat him out for that last edge spot in the first round. Bernard, I think, is a good player, but lacks some of the upside that teams are wanting in a first round receiver. Um, Brazel has some of the off field concerns. So, yeah, sorry, you were
I'll
going to throw one out.
I'll throw out a couple names. One thing that just stands out to me as well in this mock is we have not taken a secondary player since pick 18
Yeah.
to the Vikings. Like Thieneman was the last guy that went. I would not be shocked if Chris Johnson sneaks into the first round, corner out of San Diego State. I think if a team at the end of the first round, like the Chiefs, if the Dolphins don't go DB with their first pick, that could be a place.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Seattle. I think he could go. I also think that somebody's going to love D'Angelo Pons because he's just such a good player. Like,
Yeah.
he's tiny,
It
but
doesn't matter that he's tiny. That
he's
like
so
my size.
good. So I do think, like, I have a hard time seeing both those guys go, but I could see one of those corners sneaking into the late first round. Obviously, like, I just took Malachi Lawrence, who's a guy that is more projected late second. I think he's another guy that has enough pass rushing juice that I could see one of these teams. Generally these teams are better at the end of the first round. They have a little more, usually more complete rosters. So that's another one I could see.
I think
Any
that
other names? I think
I
Eli
think
Stowers is one that, like, if Sadiq goes off the board early and somebody really wants that, like, weapon, he's kind of just like a wide receiver, but like if somebody just
Yeah.
loves the athleticism,
Yeah.
he's one I could see. But yeah, I think Pons and Chris Johnson are the two guys that I feel the best about. Like, I think there's a good chance one of those guys does go in the first round.
Yeah, I think Pons is an interesting one because he definitely doesn't meet some of the benchmarks some of these teams will have for the position. But to your point, he's just a really good player. So I think somebody might fall in love with him. And as we always say, it only takes one team uh, for a guy to go first round. I'm pretty sure Kuiper had Jadarian Price going 32 to the Seahawks because they have a running back need, which they definitely do. But I thought that was kind of wild. Not that Price is not a good player, but I don't know if they're going to be looking for their running back replacement there at the end of the first round. Um, I think defensive line, given what's there, makes a lot more sense for them. So
Yeah, that would drive me crazy if I was
yeah,
a Seahawks fan. Okay, so I know, John, I don't think you'll be able to see this, but I pulled up our final results on the screen. I'm not going to read through all of these. If you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, you can read through this yourself. Pause it if you want to take a look at our final results. I do think that I'll call out like a couple of my favorite picks here and let you do the same as we conclude. One pick that I really like is the Cowboys getting Jerron McCoy at 12. I think he has potential to be a top 5 talent in this class, and the ACL injury is what prevented him from getting to show that he's an elite corner. He also has been healthy through the pre-draft process, so I think teams will be a little more comfortable with him than maybe some of the other injury risk guys.
Yeah.
Let's see. I honestly like overall, I would love this draft for the Cowboys. Like McCoy and then Caden McDonald at 20, I think is about as good as you could possibly do
Yeah.
in this
And improves your
situation.
defense a lot in just 2 picks.
Yeah. Dolphins as well. I think like coming away with
Yeah.
one of the good first round receivers at the end of the first round plus a top flight corner is about as good as the draft can go for them. So they would
Yeah.
be another one. As far as the top teams go, well, I mean, I think all the Chiefs fans would be over the moon if they came away with Bain and
If they got
Sadiq.
Bane and Sadiq, yeah, that was one I think of all the teams. That's my favorite draft. Which, I mean, I took both of those players, but I also think that'd be like best case outcome for the Chiefs if they don't trade
Yeah,
up.
and then the Rams with Maui Noah is another one at
Yeah,
13. Like I think those are that's best case scenario for them. I do think one thing I'm taking away from this is just in general, like I'm really not sure how much better the players are from 6 to 10 and 11 to 14.
yeah,
I think if you're in this range of like Dolphins, Cowboys, especially if you are looking for DB, like I'm not sure you're gonna have to move up to get the player you want. Now, if you're the Cowboys and you want a Sonny Styles or somebody like that, like yeah, you're not getting him at 12. But I don't think I'd be as motivated if I was those teams to use my additional draft capital to get into the top 10. I think if I was them, I would rather just sit and pick at 11 and 12 and then have another chance to come back around and get another talented player later in the first round.
yeah. Because I think the only way that they're getting one of the elite players is if they trade up in the top 4.
Yeah.
And one's obviously not happening. The Jets have plenty of picks. I don't think 2 is open for business. So maybe you're getting 3 or 4, but I don't know if the Cardinals or the Titans want to go down that far. So like realistically, at that point, the Giants, if they do want Sonny Styles at 5, then like you're kind of out all the elite players that you would be looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 if you want to come up for downs, but like that, do you really want to trade up that much for a safety?
No, I'd rather just stick and
At
pick
the end of the day,
McCoy. Like,
I think it makes sense for them what they got here. So
yeah, I
uh,
think the Cardinals are more likely to drop to like 5 and then still get
yeah,
one of those top flight
yeah,
players and maybe pick up a third round pick or something. Like if I was them, I think I'd be open for business there, and you could still come away with Jeremiah Love potentially at pick 5. I think that makes a lot of sense for them. All right, that'll do it for the mock draft. I hope you all enjoyed. We'll have to come back and check our work here. I do think we're gonna do worse on this one than maybe some of the ones in other
probably
years.
so.
Once you get past like 14, I would say it is wide open this year. So I think
Complete
we're
dart
gonna
throws, but
like if we mess up the early part, we got no shot later
yeah,
later in the round. But it'll be fun to track and follow. So yeah, we should have a couple more quarterback breakdowns coming out. I will eventually cover all the quarterbacks that get drafted, whether that's before or after the draft. So thanks again to everybody who's listened. John, thanks for joining, and we'll catch y'all soon.